Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to the Expanding Forward radio show. Conversations about juicy living. With your host, Carole Lewitski.
Happy 2016, everyone. It is our very first show in the new year, and I'm so happy that you're here joining us today for our Expanding Forward Blog Talk radio show. For those of you who are new to our show, hello and welcome. My name is Carole Lewitski. I am your host. We meet here live every third Monday of the month to talk about various topics related to our expansion forward on our journey of awakening. If you're listening to this on a podcast recording, you can go to blogtalkradio.com /expanding forward and sign up for the show reminders by clicking follow, and then it gives you the option to also catch the show live. This is the call-in show, so if it works better for you to be on the phone, the number is 657-383-0934. If you're listening live online, there is a chat box, so feel free to ask questions or comments. Make comments. So let's get started. Our topic today is huge. It's around worthiness and validation. And where that conversation will take us today, nobody knows, not even me. What I do know is that I am beyond stoked for the guest that we're talking with today. Before I bring her on, though, let's just chat for a little bit. I know the waiting is torture, but trust me, she's definitely worth the wait. So this topic really hits close to home for me. It's probably been the hugest part of my journey for the last 3 years in particular. In preparation for this show, I definitely was feeling butterflies in my stomach, partly nerves, partly excitement, kind of similar to what it felt like when I was just about to jump out of the airplane last September when I did a tandem jump. It's like, whoa, it's just going to be so big. It's going to just shift stuff, and it's like scary all at the same time. So random conversations have been coming up definitely for the last month with people, clients, friends, and without them even knowing that was going to be the conversation today, it's been hovering a lot in people's lives. Because I think just a lot of people can relate to these feelings of unworthiness. At one point or another in our life, someone or something or circumstances convinced us that we weren't good enough. And from that point on, we just create evidence of our unworthiness by convincing ourselves that we will only be good enough when. So sometimes it's things like when I'll have a degree, I'll be good enough. When I make a big enough salary. When my parents approve of me and my life choices. When people around me finally understand me, then I'll be good enough. When I have my life in order. When I'm finally satisfied with the way I look. When I have the big house and the perfect family, or when I have an impressive job and I'm completely self-sufficient, or when my kids grow up and become successful, then that'll show my worthiness as a parent. And so I ask you this. Whose permission are you still waiting for to start really showing up in your own life? And whose approval do you still need before you can recognize your own self-worth? And what are those things that keep you stuck and unable to recognize your own worthiness that you can fully shine your light? Mm-hmm. So before we get started diving into those questions, let's bring on our guest for today. I'm so thrilled to introduce you to Jeri Tourand. Jeri is a teacher, author, speaker, mother of 3 beautiful girls. She is a Trilotherapy practitioner, as well as a founder and head facilitator of Living from Heart Center, just to name a few things that keep her busy. Jeri's mission is to assist people in awakening to deep truth and remembrance of the divine love that they are. Please welcome my very good friend, Jeri Tourand.
Thanks, Carole. I'm so excited to be here.
Jeri,
we've come such a long way together.
Well, that's an understatement. I would say before we get chatting together, I just want to give our listeners a bit of background on how we met, because I just see the relevance related to this topic. It has everything to do with this. It started in 2012, August. We were both at a workshop with Jennifer Huff, amazing woman, teacher, guide, mentor. I actually am going to be having her as a guest on my February show, and I'm pretty stoked about that. Okay. But anyways, yeah, you and I were there, and at one point we got paired together. We were sitting side by side, and Jennifer had asked us to do an eye-gazing activity, right? That's what it was?
It was.
And I had never done that before. I don't know if you had, but I hadn't. And so it was something else to experience that with a complete stranger. I had never met you before, and we sat there for what felt like quite a long time, but in a good way. It was able to just experience something I had never experienced before. And I'll just never forget that feeling. Of course, I experienced it in my own way, but the feedback you gave me afterwards and how you were just able to tell me that in that moment, in that exchange, you had seen and experienced like the light in me. And for the longest time, I mean, the first time you said it to me, I thought, okay, well, she's just maybe seeing things that are not really there. Because, well, and it's just to show where I was at with myself, without my own self-worth, because I thought she's making that up, or it's just you see what you're going to see. But you brought it up a few other times after that first time we met, and it started slowly sinking in, because I was like, well, what would be her ulterior motive to say that to me, to express that she could see this beauty within me, that she saw that light, and you saw something that I had forgotten about myself, so deeply forgotten that I had a lot of trouble believing what you were saying. But after hearing it a few times, it's like it awakened in me the beginning of remembering, and recalling like that magnificence within myself that I had forgotten. And so it just feels very appropriate that you and I would find each other together again, having this conversation on worthiness and am I really worth it? And just I'm excited to dive in to this conversation.
Wow, thank you. That is so perfect. We're just coming full circle. Everything happens so perfectly, and that is so key. That's always been one of my gifts, is just the ability to see the light in other people, and yet I still had it blocked in myself. And I don't know how much I had to work through all of these things, and I was such a good promoter, I'd see these lights and I'd see this gift, and when you walked in the room, literally it was like, whoa, who is that? And I want her. I want to know her. And we weren't sitting next to each other, and then it just so happened that after the break, we just ended up sitting next to each other to do the avatar, I see you activity. And wow, I mean, I saw so much, and it took me a long time, and lots of, coaching other people and saying things like, you can't see in another what you don't have in yourself. And then eventually having to accept that all this light that I'm seeing in you and in others, I've got that too. So I totally get that. And I really believe that we kind of have a set point, of self-worth and how much we're able to receive, because if it's way beyond what we believe about ourselves, or how much we allow ourselves to love ourselves, we just start to sabotage and talk ourselves out of it. And, what do they want? Or, what's that ulterior motive, like you said? our minds go all sorts of strange places. Like we can't receive, or no one can love us more than how much we love ourselves and get away with it.
Right.
And so it's so important to raise that step point of how much we're willing to forgive ourselves and love ourselves, and notice those little things from our past that are still interfering with our ability to love ourselves, because we're hanging on to those as if that's who we are.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, like so many times I've seen that in myself and in others. Just they see themselves through the filter of the worst, most shameful thing they've ever done in their lives, and say things like, well, if you really knew me, you wouldn't love me. And just identifying themselves as these things, which is actually the farthest from the truth. Because then I'll ask them in the next question, or ask well, come on, do I believe that at my core that my true essence is love? Well, yes. Mm-hmm. Do I believe that God loves me, the universe loves me 100%, and yet I continue to argue with God, with the universe?
Right.
Well, I'm not worthy of that 100%, so I'll only take 10, thanks. It's so
that's powerful,
so ludicrous,
what you're saying right there. It is, and yet we do it time and time again. We convince ourselves that we're not worthy of all of that. So true. And why is it, we might not have an answer for that, but something to ask is, why is it that we can sometimes so easily see in others what we have so much trouble seeing in ourselves? Because it's legit, like what you were seeing in me, and I was also seeing that in you. I was seeing your worthiness. I was seeing that pure essence that defies all of what the ego might say, or what behaviors we might have, or what stories we're still hanging on to that serves as evidence that we're not good enough, or, like you said, if you only knew what I've done. So judgment, right? Judgment on our being a human being that just sometimes creates that standard, and yet we don't even have that for others. So it's interesting. I mean, you hear a lot about that, and even in the awakening world, of like, you can't love another if you don't love yourself first, if you don't validate yourself first. But I would beg to argue that point, because even having met you and experiencing that moment with you, I was able to see the beauty in you. I was able to love you, and yet I wasn't feeling that for myself at all. But I also feel like you were instrumental in just being that reminder for me of what I had forgotten. And so what are your thoughts around that, and how that plays into validation? Because on one hand, that's a form of validation that you were offering me. Mm-hmm. And should we be ashamed of needing that in our life?
Absolutely not. I think it's a basic need. Everyone needs to, they come into this world, and, it's kind of a foreign place. We came from this unconditionally loving, beautiful space, and then there's all this fear we come in. So I think it's very important, and some parents really realize that, and they'll acknowledge and validate their children's feelings, their children's thoughts, their beliefs, their gifts, their talents, all of that. But then, of course, you could become almost like addicted, to that need for attention and approval, because it just becomes totally linked with your self-esteem and self-worth if you don't get it. And then there's the more conscious parents that learn to validate themselves, and role model that, like validating their own feelings, and standing up for themselves, and letting go of the blame game, and maybe role modeling forgiveness, and especially self-forgiveness. And so I think, we definitely don't need to be ashamed of that, and it's important too, because it raises our self-image when we can give. Like, I really believe giving is receiving, and so it doesn't matter what order we go in. Like you said, start with looking for, like Neil Donald Walsh says, that's one of the key things, is to look for a person that needs even more what you perceive yourself to need. So whether it's love, attention, money, if you're feeling like a lack in a certain area, look for someone to give that to. And that helps to build your self-esteem and change the set point, because the more you give, the better you feel about yourself, the more you change that set point of how much you love yourself. Then you start to validate yourself. Wow, I'm really a generous person, and I'm, so it does build your self-esteem and move that set point so that you can love yourself more. So I think it doesn't really matter where you start. You can start in the mirror, you can start with another, and ideally do both.
Well, and that's what I found is just the right people started showing up in my life that were confirming and reminding me of my own piece of the puzzle and my own worthiness as a human being, my own place of why I'm here, but coming from a place where it's not just like free compliments and just free flattery, or it's really genuinely like, I see you, like the way you looked at me. And then I've come across quite a few other people since then that could see beyond the physicality, that could see beyond anything that's of this world, but that completely unites us. It's that light inside of us that is the same whether you're a prisoner in jail, whether you're homeless, whether you're the leader of government, whether you're a simple mother, a farmer. It doesn't matter who you are. That's the one thing that we all have in common. And when you meet people that can see that and can reflect it back to you, for me, that's how it's been. But it's been baby steps, because I was the last lowest on the totem pole. Like everyone else came before me. Everyone else was worth so much, but I, for some reason, had just placed myself last. And so I remember a guide telling me at one point, you can't just pop yourself to the top. It's a process. It's step by step, especially when you've become an approval junkie, where it's like you're so low on your totem pole that you rely on everyone telling you, yeah, it's okay that you do that, or it's okay that you feel that way. Like you're just constantly looking for reassurance that you're good enough as you are. And so definitely for me, it's been taken years to get to where I'm at, to just being able to say, yeah, I am good enough as me. All of it, the perfections, the imperfections, and everything in between.
Yeah, it's who am I becoming, really focusing on. It's not about the results and what you've accomplished. And, success is, am I becoming closer to my greatest version of me? So who am I becoming in this moment? So just, I think, really coming back to that present moment. And, yeah, if I do this, who am I becoming? If I don't do this, who am I becoming? And just reminding yourself. And then you're always successful if you're focused on now, who am I becoming? And, you hit on so many things in that. You're just so dead on. I'm getting tingled everywhere when I listen to you speak. I just love you so much. Because the authenticity, that genuine, there's like, that is key, because people, teachers are trained to praise, praise the behavior you like in order to reproduce more of that behavior. And that never sat well with me, because I'm like, seriously, kids, they learn to be praise junkies. And not only that, kids are born knowing now. They can see through that bullshit. And they're like, even my own kids, I'll praise them for cleaning their room or cleaning up after themselves. Well, it's just because you want me to clean. They start to see the kind of manipulative process and how this love becomes somewhat conditional upon, as long as I do what you want, then you love me. And that's the only time I get praise. And then it's like, even some kids would start asking me when I was a teacher, they'd ask, like, well, what do I get for it if I do this? And I thought, wow, there is something wrong with this system. And then I really started to notice the difference between, like, praise and acknowledgement, and that I see you. And what you said, there was this genuine, just fully present, I see you, beyond all that other stuff. And so then I started to really explore that with my own kids and in the teaching field. Like, no, I want to see them. And I want them to know that it's them that I'm seeing. I'm not praising the behavior. So at first it was praise the effort, not the results. what are those characteristics that I admire in them, that are special, their gifts, their talents, where they're like, whoa, it feels different. And so those are the people, like you said, when you're ready, those key people start to show up that just start to acknowledge the truth and really see you, and you can't help but have a spark of remembrance, like, whoa, well, if they see that, maybe, what
you start slowly believing it.
Yeah.
There could be truth to this. Yeah. No, that's so true. And when you talk about parenting, I think that's an important point to bring up, because I've been guilty of that myself. It's like you're trying to build up self-esteem, but it can really be taken to excessive levels where it's like it's just too much, right? Where they say, like, look, mommy, and they want approval,
and then if you don't praise, it's like, don't you like it?
Yeah. No, guilty as charged. Oh my God.
Oh, all of us. I mean, and it's we think it's from love. We think a lot of stuff because it's just, that's how we're trained. That's our programming. And so right away you just have to kind of laugh and forgive yourself. And just be grateful. Well, you know what? I know better now. And our parents, the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Our parents did the best they could with what they knew as well. And it's like they couldn't give what they didn't have to give themselves. So it's interesting to see, because we can easily bring that into our adult life. I remember being a young mother and still feeling like I just wanted my mom to tell me I was doing a good job as a mom. And I just wanted to hear it so badly, and never asked for it, but I just wanted it to show up. And it's almost like I felt like I wouldn't believe it for myself unless I heard it from her. Yeah. And my mom is awesome. She would have told me that in a heartbeat, but that she didn't, I think, was so perfect, because it pushed me to find it in myself to be okay with how I was parenting, and not just be okay, but just be happy that I am doing the best I can in all moments. And what more could I do? What more could we ever ask of ourselves?
Yeah, isn't it so perfect? I love when that happens, because I was, banging my head against a wall in pretty much all my relationships with men, still seeking my dad's approval. So my whole childhood was about that, and just be proud of me, just let me be good enough, and trying to prove myself and impress my dad. And so I get these great grades, and I come home and look, I got 98% on my math test, and what the heck, 98? That's so close to 100. Why couldn't you get 100? I'm like, everything. It was, he'd find the one little piece to focus on that, translated to me into I'm not good enough. I'll never be good enough, or sharing some vulnerable things with my mom one time too, just when I was molested basically, and having her not believe me and feeling so awkward and uncomfortable, and then just changing the subject and nothing was ever done. And then of course that's I'm not important. See, I'm not good enough. So always reinforcing that belief that I'm not good enough. See, I'm not good enough. And of course that's the energy you put out. You have, every relationship is going to show up, to invite you into changing that. So it's going to trigger it, right? Triggering that
so
I'm not
true.
good enough.
You're so right about that, and how easily we could feel a victim of that, right? And it's just incredible to hear you speak about it, because there's no tone of feeling a victim. It's just really seeing how it's not that it's okay. Obviously what happened is horrible, and could have totally been, it's absolutely, and could have been handled completely differently, and yet that's how it showed up for you, and then you got to see how that played out in your life and in future relationships. So how would you say that affected your wanting validation or proof of, because obviously with the way your mother reacted, it would have affected your sense of self-worth. It could not affect that, right?
Absolutely. No, and I can't even begin to tell you about what my mother went through, a lot of the stuff. So she really did do the best she could. That was, was
Absolutely.
really tough topic for her. Although for sure it had an effect, the way my mother and father really didn't love themselves and had no idea how to validate themselves, let alone someone else. And so I was always trying to prove myself and prove that I'm good enough and prove that I'm smart enough and impress people, and especially men, to the point that I'd have, I couldn't even be by myself because I wasn't good enough if I was by myself. See, somebody always had to be loving me, and so my relationships would all overlap for a while, and I would even go so far as to just, I became such a people pleaser, as long as they felt good. It didn't matter how uncomfortable I was. I would sacrifice myself, because, I didn't want to make anyone uncomfortable like that. I didn't want to make, any of that stuff to resurface. And I just had this mantra, make everyone feel better than before you met them. Make everyone feel better than before you met them, which, I thought was a really great mantra. Although then I'd say yes to everybody, guys that I really had no interest whatsoever in. And in the long run, they ended up getting a lot more hurt than if I'd just been honest. And including, even sex. I'd actually just allow myself to give myself to people that was not healthy. It just, I let myself be kind of used and abused, and then I just go home and cry myself to sleep. And, and I kind of remember one of the turning points was reading Conversations with God by Neil Donald Walsh, and starting to get these quotes from him. And one of them said, "Never betray yourself in order to not betray another. Self-betrayal is the highest form." And I went,
wow.
What? And honestly, I memorized that quote from that day on, and it hit me so hard how much I'd been betraying myself in order to not betray another and putting everyone before me. And that's really was the start of me thinking, okay, I need to learn how to validate myself and stop. And I would start catching myself then oh my God, why did I do this? To impress someone again or to prove myself again. This is not even who I am. And so then my mantra became, I express myself to impress myself.
Beautiful.
And it's not about impressing anyone else. It's okay, how can I impress myself? Will this impress me? Does this impress me? And and if I did something and caught myself, it's forgiveness is super key, super, super important. You've got to forgive yourself. You really are. Your essence is innocent. You are doing the best you can, and forgiveness is love. So as soon as you screw up, be grateful because it's an opportunity to send more love into the world through forgiveness. Forgiving another, forgiving yourself. But, then I the only person I need to prove myself to is me. How can I impress myself? How can I love myself more in this moment? Every time I felt bad or felt like I, didn't stand up for myself or started blaming, getting caught in that whole cycle of guilt, right? Because our guilt, since we do tend to identify ourselves through our most guilty things, just noticing how that plays out, right? That our guilt demands punishment. Subconsciously, guilt demands pain and suffering. And so if you find that you're, always in pain and always suffering, get that you've got a guilt there to forgive. Because otherwise you're just going to keep attracting situations that make you feel more guilty or continue that cycle of suffering. And it's just all linked into this basic guilt, this basic fear that I'm not lovable. It just stems from that. And man, I've got this major theme going on that, this whole cycle of guilt, that I'm seeing it over and over again in people I'm coaching and in myself, of course. Lots of opportunities.
When would you say that the question to ask when we are going to say yes to something is what's my own motive in this? Am I saying yes to this because I really feel it's in my highest to do it? It feels right for me? Or is it coming from a place of looking like a good friend, looking like a reliable employee, looking like the committed wife, or just being the good parent? Or we stop and really take a moment to ask ourselves a question, when I say yes to things, because I can relate to you so much in that it was just so much of what I was doing was coming from a place of people-pleasing rather than doing what honors me in that moment. And that quote you read says it perfectly, because when you betray yourself, you end up betraying everyone involved in that experience. Or another way of saying, when you dishonor yourself, you dishonor everyone. So in our heads, we could think, oh, I'm doing that person a favor because I'm being the nice friend. But it's 100% never the case. If you're dishonoring you, it dishonors everyone involved.
Yes, thank you.
Right?
That is yes, because I used to always ask, okay, what would love do now? What would love do now, right? And I was so focused externally. Okay, if I really love this person, what should I do? And then suddenly I had that same kind of realization. It's like, hang on, the only person here is me. On a quantum level, we are all one.
Well, and so, you're still loving the other. When you honor yourself, you are loving the other at the utmost level.
Yeah, it was that realization. I'm like, so I changed the question to, if I really loved, trusted, and respected myself, what would I do? And then I really got that when you act in when I act in my highest interest, it always is in everyone's highest. Always. Because I'm acting from love. So love is always in the highest. They might not feel like it's in the highest at this time because sometimes it requires, a separation, like things like that. But it always is in the long run. If you're acting from love and from loving yourself, and what's in your highest is in everybody's highest. And I went, oh, it was what?
Well, it's a huge aha, because in our quest as people-pleasing, in that people-pleasing identity, it ultimately you're trying to make everyone around you comfortable, like the most comfortable possible. So it doesn't matter how I feel. I'm going to just dismiss that because how the others feel is more important, so that they be comfortable. But at what point, when you really stop to think of it, there's who are we to decide that comfort in the other is what's in their highest? Because there's times when someone has done something that they felt was in their highest. It caused me discomfort, but it was a perfect thing for me that I needed to help me grow in that part of my journey, right? Like even just seeking that validation, seeking that approval, even going as far as stepping into my own passion and following like what was showing up in my life, going on to Peru when I was 40 for my 40th, and just really starting to embrace me, separating myself completely from my everyday life so I could start rebuilding what I had completely put to the side. And from there, going into working coaching and doing what I do now. And in my old ways, in my default of being, I would have wanted everyone to be like, good job, like that's the right path. But you know what? Someone specific in my life that I love dearly showed up as that one person that would say to me, I completely disapprove with everything you're doing, and I will never support the path you're on. And I love this person, but for this individual to show up in my life, it's like I came to see that was such a gift for me, because what it did for me, like if there was a voice to be heard inside my head, it would have gone something like this, like, Carole, if everyone around you was against you, did not support or approve what you do and who you are you still willing to show up as you?
Yeah.
And it really became that choice point where I was just being asked, when are you going to be okay with just being good enough as you, not needing anyone to tell you, but trusting your own inner knowingness and knowing that there's a greater plan, and even if it causes discomfort in another, can you be okay with that? Because that's maybe exactly what they need in their life. Who am I to know I'm going to sit there and wait till every single person in my life approves of the decisions I make before I move forward? What an insidious trick of the ego to keep me stuck and keep me hidden and keep me small so that I don't shine my light.
So well said, yes. Yeah, it's so perfect, isn't it? I had one of those gifts as well, that one person that was just like, didn't matter what I did, he would not approve, and finally that's how I started to really see my pattern. That was what forced me to finally say, okay, this is my job. It forced me to just validate myself and look within and ask why and what was I doing, and I started to see all the patterns, and wow, he was so key. And so can you imagine if he just had done the whole people pleasing, okay, I'm going to say what she wants to hear. And so, wow, and how many times I had done others a disservice by not being authentic.
And again, I love what you say about forgiveness, but I would say as well to have grace for ourselves, because it's a process. It's something we have. It's been so ingrained in us from whatever young age, without blaming people or circumstances. It just is what it is. So it impacted how we saw life, how we perceived ourselves in relation to others. And then when you start recognizing, you know what, maybe there's another way of doing this, and it doesn't have to be like me, myself, and I don't care what anybody says or thinks, I'm going to do what I'm going to do. Like sometimes we could think that you have to go to that extreme. It couldn't be further from the truth. It could happen to, depending on the effect for sure, but it doesn't have to look that way, because for me, there was also some entanglement around humility. Some misunderstood definition of what humility is, right? That if I was to be a humble person so I could get a good place in heaven, I would just cut myself down and make myself last and make myself unworthy, when in fact, that's like cutting down the divine in me, the beauty of God that exists inside of me. Like you can't just pick and choose parts of yourself to cut down. You're cutting down the whole thing. And so what I came to see is that there's an even greater humility that exists, is in recognizing your greatness.
Yeah. And
then stepping forward into that, not coming from a place of arrogance or superiority. We are all equal. In the eyes of the universe of God, we are all equal. And so why shouldn't we just show up as that, our own unique piece of who we are? Show up. Because as long as we're using the excuses, well, I'll only be good enough when, or I'm not as good enough or as good as, just a comparison game.
Oh, yes. That's a big one, too.
That's right. It's completely dismissing the unique originality of Creator incarnate in each and every one of us.
Yeah. Can you imagine the world if everyone would actually just be willing to show up as themselves? And, that is kind of like taking your piece in the puzzle of heaven on earth. It would be amazing. Everything would just work. There would just be peace and love, and it's like that's how important this conversation is, right? It's like my heart was pounding, in before, just thinking, oh my gosh, this is huge to get this. Like this has been and it is the theme of my life. Like all my work kind of revolves around this. So how could I not be grateful for all of those opportunities to see that and to have experienced these different patterns, and so I can help people now. And that's and I believe that, you go through what you go through so you can help others go through what you've been through. And so just moving through it and being kind and gentle with yourself as you move through it. Because I love that saying, you can be right or you can be kind, or you can be right or you can be happy. And that includes with yourself. You can be right about yourself. You can see, I'm not good enough. I told you that, I'm right about this belief that I'm not good enough. Here it is again, right? Or you can choose to be kind to yourself and just say, wow, thank you. here's another layer that I can release. Like,
absolutely.
And I'm okay.
Absolutely.
I'm good enough, and this is going to serve me. And here's another story or another thing that I can use to help other people. And a reminder for myself to just love myself through it. Another opportunity to love and forgive.
And people show up perfectly in our life to show us that as well. I can see that for me is just when we can finally start seeing every single interaction we have with others as just, it's like information. It's giving us insight into ourselves rather than taking their way of behaving personally as a direct reflection of who we are. And I think sometimes we can stay stuck in that thinking that, I mean, I see that in my own kids. When you're little, you really believe in your own magnificence, and you really know that all is well, and you're just like this radiant beam of light. Yeah. And then there's just a time when they start questioning it. They start seeing other people's behavior as like, well, maybe I'm not good enough because this person reacted that way when I did that. Mm-hmm. Maybe I am too over-the-top excited, or maybe I am too shy, to this, to that, right? Like, it's just the list goes on where we start believing other people's stories. And I would say that's probably been the most powerful thing I've come to see, of course, through, like, amazing teachers and guides, is how people treat us, the way people perceive us, the way people react or don't react, has nothing to do with us and everything to do with them, where they're at in their own journey and how they perceive their own life.
Yeah. Yes. One of
right?
Those
and then
sorry, yeah.
No, go ahead. Sorry, there's a bit of a delay, so you go ahead.
Yeah. One more of those quotes that came out that like changed my life was you teach others how to treat you by the way you treat yourself. And just noticing all the ways that was true for me. That it was kind of like the betrayal quote. One of those. Oh my God. Yeah, if I'm not going to respect myself and I have this belief and that's what I'm projecting out there, then I'm going to attract the same energy, people that, make me feel like I'm not respected so that I get to be right, and just reinforcing all my beliefs. And
so true. Holy smokes. So like that. And then it completely removes you as a victim. You can't feel like, well, I'm not being respected, or I'm being taken for granted, or I'm being dishonored. Well, that it would even show up in your life is because you're treating yourself that way. I'm treating myself that way, that it would even show up. And it's not about beating ourselves up about it either and saying, well, now it's all my fault. It's right. It's just about It's about us just saying, okay, like useful information. Now, how can I do it differently? How can I see myself differently? And how cool this person would show up in my life so I could see it for myself, that I'm still putting myself at the bottom of the totem pole in this area or that area. And let's shift, let's change that.
Well, that's why relationships are so key. Like connecting with people is so important, because that really is, to a large extent, that is their role, to show us and where we're at. And, and sometimes, to show us how far we've come, by the shift in the people that we're attracting in the relationships, and to show us where there's still some stuck stuff. Because as long as it's subconscious and we don't know about it, it runs our lives. And these things show up and we feel like victims sometimes. And then they show us these to bring it to the conscious mind, like, wow, how is it me that's not respecting myself? Is that why I keep staying and seeing people that don't respect me? And allowing us to finally look at it so we can release it and change that pattern. So it's just, I honor everyone who comes into my awareness, and especially even the ones that trigger me once in a while. It's like, oh, what is this? Cool, thank you. Like, I actually get excited about being triggered, and it's so cool to get to that point.
Wow, I can't say that I'm there, that I get excited about it.
Well, it depends with whom. There's still some people that particularly family, like they're the hardest. They're, your children or your biological family. Can't say that I'm always excited, and but I've definitely noticed, like, I do get excited sometimes when things kind of go awry, or you know, in my ability to now forgive myself and catch those little judgments the way that I judge myself, which is the opposite of validating myself, right? To just forgive. Now I can see that others, I have so much more compassion and understanding for other people instead of, like, taking it personally, like you said.
Right.
Just seeing, okay, you know what? It's a cry for love. If it's not an act of love, it's a cry for love. Like, every time. And hurting people hurt people. And, you know I've done it. And I've
well,
cried
we all
out.
have, right? It's just recognizing that we're on both sides at different times. Like, it goes both ways, and sometimes it also means distancing yourself from certain people in your life for a period of time, and that's okay too. It's not about running away from it, but just sometimes honoring yourself is saying that there's a time for separation, so that you can both grow individually, and you can't know what's in the best interest of the other. That's why the only thing we can ever trust is our own inner knowing. It's up for ourselves.
Yeah, and it takes practice. You got to practice just trusting.
Oh gosh.
And then you do slowly gain the evidence that yes, you can trust this. And the times that you don't listen, you'll notice, okay, things kind of went astray, and I knew, right? I did have that inner knowing that I didn't trust, and so I love it when people disagree in a way and say, yeah, I'll never support you, you're wrong, disagree with you, because it forces you to start to look inside and trust yourself, and it all points us back to us, doesn't it? Like,
yeah, it's all for us. It's absolutely all happening for us, and as long as we could see it that way, then yeah, it's like bring it. Let's just go deeper into this and see where it takes us. But it's a process, and definitely to honor the baby steps, because especially if we're so used to saying yes to everything and everyone, that's going to be our default, right? We're just going to automatically just not even pause and take a moment and reflect, is this really in my highest? So what would you say are pragmatic, like practical things that a person, like what do you suggest to your clients as far as questions people can ask themselves to verify where their decision process is coming from when they're maybe feeling prone to going to old patterns of just doing it because it's being asked and not stopping? So do you have any ideas around that?
Oh, there's so many questions I ask myself. Well, and I think we covered a lot of them. Just, if I really loved, honored, and trusted myself, what would I do now? And so sometimes because you're not really there yet, you don't really trust yourself, you're not quite sure what that looks like, you have to think, well, if I did, or imagine, what would, some people would say, what would Oprah do? What would Jesus do? What would, right, someone that they know, they really admire and respect. They have to kind of like, okay. So if I really did trust myself, what would I do now? It's kind of like that question. If I, if I had unlimited resources and all of that, what would I do? If money was no issue, if time was no issue, all those excuses we make. So, that's.
Would you say as well that having someone in your life that genuinely sees you could ask, like I found for myself that really helped me, is to just have someone I could call that knows me in my journey of awakening, like that knows me in wanting to just be fully authentic and understands how our old ways can just interfere and step in, and just to have someone I could call and be like, hey, this is what I'm experiencing and this is what I'm questioning, and just to have that reminder of the things, because it's such a new process, right?
Well, that's the thing. You can't, when it's your own stuff, there is like an attachment, and it's really hard to get out of your own way and to see. So to have somebody that you can just open up to and reflect back to you is, you're not supposed to do this alone. That's why there's other people here, right? You have a really good one about that.
What's that?
About what were you sharing with me earlier about all the, being on a planet by ourselves?
Oh, right. Well, and I thought of another one just recently. I was like, would we judge ourselves for needing a crutch until our ankle is healed? Like, we wouldn't sit there and be like, oh my gosh, I still need a crutch. Like, oh my gosh, it's like week number 2 and I still have a crutch. I mean, you would keep the crutch until you're fully healed. And so even if we're reaching, right, like, so even if we're reaching out to someone and we could so easily judge it as like, okay, well, am I calling my friend or am I checking in with my coach to get validation? And so what if you are? At the beginning, it's like relearning a new language that you knew a long time ago, but you were maybe 3, you were maybe 2, I don't know, you were maybe 6 if you were lucky you lasted that long before you got knocked down and told you weren't good enough. So can we be okay that we're going to rely at the beginning? I certainly have. For the last 3 years, I've completely relied on genuine family, soul family, people that see me, that really see me and can separate what's identity and what's people pleasing and what's ego and what's all these other pressures I've put on myself all these years. And I'd be like, no, like just this is it. This is you. And just remind me. And that I need it less and less. Awesome. But for however long I may still need it in this area or that area of my life, can I be okay with that? Darn right I can be, just as much as I would be. And the planet analogy was just a goofy thing I had thought about once. I was like, if we didn't need to rely on each other as human beings, then why didn't God just like plant us on each our own individual planets? Like, obviously, if we got all put together, on some level, we need each other. Should we be... Yeah. Should we feel shame around that? No, goodness, like that is about being vulnerable. That is about reaching out. That is about deepening connection and being okay with that. And then as we strengthen that validation muscle that we then only need from ourselves, then when it shows up and we hear it, it's like, that's nice. It comes more to us from a level of like encouragement, like, oh, thank you for that. Like, that's nice encouragement. Genuinely receive it, right? Finally. And genuinely receive it without it being like, oh God, I need it. Like I need it. And it's fine when we do, right? It's fine when we do until we don't need it anymore. Then it's not needed. So how cool is that? I love that crutch analogy. Thank you. That is so perfect. Well, it's just so much practice of having grace with ourselves, like not being so hard on ourselves. I think there's just this idea that there's a place to get to, and what if there's really nowhere to get to? Like, what if it's just like right here, right now is perfect, however that looks, and then you remove the pressure of this, like one day when I'm so enlightened, I won't need validation anymore, and I'll be like, okay, awesome for you, because I'm right here right now, and it looks like this, and isn't it perfect the way it looks? Can we be okay that we're good enough, like right now, that we're all doing our darn best? Yeah. There you go. See? And that's it. I mean, I'm just like, that's it, right? That's so key, just being okay with right here, right now. I am good enough. I am doing my best. However that looks for me is perfect. It doesn't matter what it looks like for anyone else. And absolutely. Asking, getting the support that you need, and there's nothing wrong with that. And the beautiful thing is, eventually, you do learn to validate yourself, and you learn to receive validation and compliments and be able to just say thank you and actually take it in and feel it and not have to deflect it or not have to, this old thing, and because, and then, of course, then the validations just start to come. So when you want them the most and need them, it's like you can't get that's when they don't show up. And then when you finally just let go, I don't really need them, and or you just start to validate yourself more and more, and then you notice that you start to receive compliments easier and easier, and then you're
your self-love goes up. That set point has changed, and you can only go back so far,
true.
right? Because it's like that anchor in the boat. You can only, you're anchored at a different place.
So true. I absolutely love your mantra. I express myself to impress myself, right? Is that the way it goes?
That's the way it goes, yeah.
I love it.
That's lot.
Like, and it just says the whole, like, in such few words, completely encompasses everything we've said today. And so on a final note, I wanted to just say one of the most powerful questions I ever heard said this was by Jennifer Huff, and she had said, if the universe, she said this to me, and I've heard her say it to multiple people, but if the universe thought you were a good idea, if so much detail and attention was put into bringing you into creation, that you be right here, right now, then don't you think that's evident enough that you were wanted and that you're good enough?
Yeah.
So Jeri, thank you so much for being here today. Like, I just, probably you can feel just how passionate I am about this topic. I feel
I'm getting
like
giggles all over and
lifting off my chair. I'm like, Kate, get a grip, Carole. But it really means the world to me that we would be brought here together to have this conversation. That I really feel started the day, and that day in the workshop room where you started waking up in me the remembering of my own magnificence. And I believe that anyone that is privileged enough to work with you will walk away changed on a deep level, because I know I did.
Oh,
so
ditto.
Thank you.
My gosh, you've been amazing in my life and totally assisted me in moving forward and believing in myself, and that constant reflection. And
so how can people reach you,
grateful.
Jeri? I want to make sure people know how to reach you so that we don't get to the top of the hour here and they don't get your contact information, because I want as many people to be exposed to the work that you do. So please let us know where we can contact you and connect with you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I do the coaching and unconditional love retreats, which I think are so amazing. Lots of different things. So I'm at Living from Heart Center. So on Facebook, my business page is Living from Heart Center with an ER, not an RE in center. And the email is livingfromheartcenter@gmail.com. Or you can call or text me at 780-977-2257.
Fantastic. Awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much. And thank you to our listeners for being here. If you have friends or family that you think would enjoy our show, please feel free to send them the link so they can join us as well. If you're listening to this on a podcast recording, you can go to blogtalkradio.com/expanding forward and sign up for show reminders to catch the show live for future episodes. We can also be reached at expandingforward.com. And if you'd like to receive my bi-monthly Words of Inspiration, the short newsletter I send out, you can sign up for that with your email at the top right-hand corner. And if you're a fan of Facebook, you can check out our page at /expandingforward. And most certainly feel free to email me as well, Carole@lewitski.com, for any questions or comments. I would love connecting with any of you. So thank you also to my good friend Adam Lamb for helping us today with technical support, which is really awesome because I get to be that much more present to you, Jeri, in this incredible conversation that moved me and every time it just changes me on such a deep level. So thank you, Jeri. Thank you to our listeners. I love you all and wish you the best rest of your day ever.
Love you all. Thank you so much.
Love you, Jeri. Okay, bye.
All right. Bye-bye.